Well, it's good to be with you again this morning as we are continuing on through our journey of outsiders. My name is Kevin Young. I have the privilege of serving at Christ's Table as lead clergy. If you'd like to know more about Christ's Table, visit that URL right up there, www.christstable.today. There, you're going to have an opportunity to sign up for the email list. I would encourage you to do that so that you are aware of all of the things that are going on around Christ's Table. We do more than just this Bible study, and would love to have you be a part of who we are and what we're doing. We are primarily a ministry that is working in the margins for people who are disillusioned with the church, disconnected from the church, done with the church. We understand that. Though many of the people who are part of Christ's Table are still connected to other faith communities and then use us as just a discipleship and resource set up, and we don't mind that at all, but primarily our heartbeat goes to those people who want to still have a spiritual connection with God, with Jesus, but have trauma or drama or difficulty with the church. And so that's what we do. That's where we are and where our heart is. And so this study is kind of born out of that. Many of us who are in that space feel like outsiders from the church and from the worshiping community. And so what we've done is we've pulled together 24 different outsiders in the Bible to show you, to show me, to show all of us that we are not alone. And if you would like to follow along on this study of the 24 different individuals over 6 weeks, you can visit the URL right there at the bottom of your screen, go.christstable.today/outsiders. There you can download the PDF to this study for free. You're also going to find some other information there that you can take advantage of. But if you'd like a printed copy of this study, we have this. We have a gravity study that has an adolescent bent to it. I was going to say that developmentally appropriate for adolescents, a devotional study for them. And if you'd like those printed materials, then you can get those at that URL right at the bottom of your screen as well. Just click on the little button that says Get the Box, and there's a lot of stuff in there, and we would love to send that to you. And in so doing, you also help support us and this ministry so that we can continue on. Speaking of continuing on, why don't we go ahead and continue on? So we are on our third day of looking into outsiders today, and we are looking at Jabez, which if you have been at one point an insider in the religious community, Jabez may well be a name that you are familiar with, whether or not you read the book. There's a lot of controversy over that, and I don't want to get into all of the controversy over Jabez. I'd just much rather stay out of the controversies. But Jabez is a very interesting story and a very short story, and so I'm always thankful for the passages that are short because it allows us to really kind of chew on what's going on here and sometimes even fill in some of the blanks ourselves with our own stories. And we kind of see in this passage that we're going to be in today that Jabez seems to be something of an outsider at one point in his life. And so where we get that from is in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. And all that we know about Jabez comes from that text right there in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verses 9 through 10. And my computer is going off this morning. So welcome to those of you who are logging in, who are logging on, and who are commenting. I love to see those. They actually, whenever you comment, come up on my screen over here, so I actually see them. And if there's a question or a comment or something that comes up and I see it in time and have time to handle it, then I'll handle those live. And so there's that. Now let's do this. 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9. There was a man named Jabez, and this comes in the middle of essentially one of those long diatribes of this person was born to this person, was born to this person, was born to this person. And so it comes in the middle of one of these genealogies, and there's like this little sidebar break. There was a man named Jabez who was more honorable than any of his brothers. And so has a family, has brothers, sounds like not a great family situation. Many of us can relate, right, to a not so great family situation. Not all of us grew up in the Beaver home, right? So his mother named him Jabez because his birth had been so painful. Imagine that the name that you are given is a name that is born out of trauma or out of something negative. This is seemingly rather common in ancient times, especially in ancient Jewish times. It also, though, is it's a tough cross to bear, right? So that every time you hear your name called, it is called as a reminder of something that isn't something you want to be reminded of, either as the person whose name it is, Jabez, or by the person who's calling the name is going to know that there's something here as well, because Jabez essentially translates to pain in birth, heartache. And so this was sad for Jabez and places him outside, right? Even just in a name. Some of you know what that's like, right? To have a name that puts you outside of communities. You don't have the right name. You don't have the right pedigree. Or maybe your name has been soiled by one of your brothers. Jabez, if his name weren't bad enough, Jabez's family name was apparently not a rising star, thanks to the rest of the family. But Jabez is the one, and the way this is framed almost makes it sound as though everybody knew Jabez's story. Jabez, he is the one who prayed to the God of Israel, "Oh, that you would bless me." There's one. "That you would expand my territory." There's two. "Be with me in all that I do." There's three. "And keep me from all trouble and pain." There's four. So what we see here is Jabez praying four things that are redemptive, right? These four things would be life-changing: to receive blessing, to have the territory expanded, for God to be with Jabez in everything that he does, and to keep him from all trouble. And you notice that last word there, pain. You see, that's the second time that we see, in fact, it's kind of the third time that we see the idea or the word pain there. Jabez being a play on words of pain, and then him being named that because the birth was so painful there at the end of verse 9. Then at the end of verse 10, he's praying that he would be kept from pain. So apparently pain is a part of his family, and there is a thread that runs through it, from his brothers to his mother to his birth to his name, and now that thread runs directly into prayer. Fascinating here, because Jabez prays that God would overturn any curse essentially associated with his name and turn it into blessing. Jabez looks at this thing in his life that makes him an outsider, and he prays to God and says, God, pleads with God, would you take away and overturn the negative and the curse to this and turn it into something that is a blessing? It requires faith. I'm not sure what Jabez would have done if God doesn't answer the prayer. But what we see here, I think, is something that is important, not so much in the answering, but in the stance. And that Jabez understands that even though he may feel as though he is an outsider, he and God together are insiders. And so he prays his prayer that God would overturn any curse associated with his name and turn it into blessing. And I probably don't have to talk much here about the power and the presence of prayer. I know, even for me, prayer can be difficult. I recognize prayer can be tough, but prayer is important. And I say this a lot, that prayer when I was growing up was important because it was almost like a It's almost like a way to magically get what we wanted out of God. But the older that I get, the more that I realize that I think that the true power of prayer and the need of prayer is because prayer puts me into a place, into a stance where it's not God that changes, but it ends up being me who changes. And my perception, lots of P words today, and my perception of the world around me and how I interact with it. So Jabez, as we said, prayed for 4 things: to be blessed, to have his territory expanded, to be with him in all that he does, and to be kept from trouble and pain. And it's interesting that of those 4 things, 2 of them are physical and real time, reality, practical, tangible, and 2 of them are spiritual. Now, I don't want to make too much of this, that there's a 50-50 split. I don't want to make too much of this, that there are 2 physical and that there are 2 spiritual. But I also don't want to make too little of that. Because as I read that and realized, I started kind of assessing, taking a measurement of my own prayers. And in those moments where I feel like an outsider, I feel like oftentimes my prayers tend to be unbalanced, which means that probably the desires of my heart, the things that I'm feeling, are unbalanced as well. And so I wonder if you are in a season where you are feeling like an outsider from some community. Maybe it's a religious worshiping community, but maybe it's a family, maybe it's a career, a profession, maybe it's with a spouse or with children or grandparents, whatever it may be that you are feeling as though you are an outsider of a community that you would much rather be an insider of. I wonder if you were to assess your prayers or your desires, the things that you want, would you find that they are in balance? I think it's important for us that whenever we are outside, that we take care of ourselves. And sometimes I think we get into this mindset where we think, if I could only be inside, then everything would be okay. If God would only grant my request as he granted Jabez's, then everything would be okay. And I think that my hope, my desire is, as we go through these 24 outsiders, that there will be a realization and an understanding, a recognition that we can be okay as an outsider. That even though a door may open for us to walk into the inside of the group or the community that we want to be a part of, it may well be that our greatest power and our greatest transformation and our greatest joy and peace, our greatest relationship with Jesus and with God can come in those moments, in those seasons when we are outside rather than inside. I said this 2 days ago, I think Monday, and I'll say it again here. I say that because I think that as we go through this, what we're going to see is that oftentimes it feels as though Jesus is actually outside with the outsiders rather than inside, more often than not. It feels as though so much of what God says and what God desires and what God hopes for and teaches and commands the insiders in regard to are things for the outsiders. So if you are an outsider, you're not alone. And Jabez is proof of that because God heard his prayer and the desire of his heart from the outside. Until tomorrow.